Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Oh, hello everyone. Welcome to Technology Hell. Well, welcome, and it's taken us forever for me to figure out how to do Horizon version, this version live. But believe it or not, there was a YouTube video to tell me how to fix it. But I guess we have to tune in every time. I have to push in advanced settings every time to make it horizontal. So like I said, last week, yesterday I did this talk, and I was watching some clips just to kind of, I was thinking, I'll promote it tonight and stuff, and I was watching some clips, and I kind of realized that I was a little bit, I felt like a little bit edgy, like I was a little bit too edgy. Okay, there, I got my mic on better. Let me know in the comments if you can hear me. The comments don't only come up briefly, but let me know if the comments if you can hear everything okay. So, Josh, you can start the talk now. So we don't have to, no one has to hear me fumble. So welcome to Revolution, everybody. One of the things we're going to talk about today is what we've been really like beating a dead horse about, arguing well, but we're going to talk a little bit about why is that something that we want to do. What does that look like, and should I be pushing it? I realize it can be really tough ask for a lot of people. I've had a lot of pushback even from close friends recently, especially given the everything that's going on with the election, and everybody seems to be on the edge of their seats with this election, and there seems to be a lot of fear, and rightfully so, I guess. Some rightfully so. I don't like to live in fear. We're gonna have to do work like this either way, no matter who wins the election. It'll be harder, it'll be different either way. But there's a lot of fear stuff, a lot of fear going around, a lot of stuff in the media, and it's hard to know what to believe and what not to believe. But so there's a lot of division. And so I will continue to push what I feel might be unpopular, but extremely important message of communicating with each other and coming together and having tough conversations. So yesterday when I did this talk, I had different verses, I had different things around it and different ideas, and I just shortened it up, cut it down, and because I think there's just a really good way to look at this and focus on this. So when I'm calling this talk, and I don't usually name my talks, I usually leave that up to Josh, but doing tension well. And how do we do tension well? There's always someone who does yard work whenever we start Revolution. How do we do tension well? And what did Dr. King say about this? And in his letter to a letter from a Birmingham jail, he says, actually, we who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already there. And so, people accused Dr. King of bringing tension into towns where they were still practicing segregation even though they weren't supposed to. And by bringing these protests and these different things, that he was creating tension. But Dr. King's argument is like, this tension already exists. We're just exposing the tension. We're kind of like ripping off the Band-Aid and looking at the tension. And so we have to learn how to live in the tension of conversation rather than we have a choice of tension really right now. We can either live within the silent tension of things, or we can face the tension head on and realize that we're not creating tension, that we're not creating problems. There's a problem there. And if we ignore the problem, it's not just going to go away. If we ignore each other, if we ignore the other side, we're never going to come to an agreement and things aren't going to change. We can sit in our little echo chambers all day on social media and just write about how angry you are and everything that's going on and things like that. But so often we're in an echo chamber. So much so that recently I saw a progressive pastor say to his folks online, he said to people, he said, listen, if you're a liberal or a leftist who isn't voting for Joe Biden, please comment here so I know I can block you. So, it's like, and Jesus said, you'll know them by their loyalty to their king, by their partisan politics. It's really not right or left when we get so partisan. And honestly, I think as ministers and leaders, if we're really trying to reach people, we don't really get that kind of that type of luxury to exclude. It's like, wow, this guy doesn't even want to change people's minds or have tough conversations. He just wants to preach to the choir, as we used to call it, and create that. So what happens with that is nothing changes. We just, like, I have some friends who are doing this big thing, a church event, where they're denouncing nationalism, and they're going to get everybody in their church together and they're going to denounce nationalism. Now, I honestly don't think that anybody in that church is going to go, oh, we're not Christian nationalists? Oh, geez, I'm in the wrong church, but we're denouncing it, so tell me more about that. No, everybody's been like, yeah, but it's like this just echo chamber of just what I watched evangelicals do my whole life is we preach to the choir, and no minds are changed, and we just want to reaffirm our beliefs. Back in my more radical days when I would speak at the evangelicals, I like to shake them up. I used to call that type of thing spiritual masturbation. And so we just kind of like pat each other on the back. But Dr. King, some of the stuff, he says it's always the right time to do the right thing. And a right delayed is a right denied. And so often people think like, well, if you're having these conversations and you're trying to be a peacemaker, you're not facing the problem. But part of this is that the war is not going to be fought with weapons, thank God, if we're smart. We will be using conversation and words and love. And remember what Dr. King said is, thank God Jesus didn't say like your enemies. He said love your enemies. So we don't have to like that people might want to take our rights away. And honestly, I don't think a lot of those people on the right or on certain want to take your rights away. I think they just want certain things, and scary things that happen to be part of the other person's belief system or the party's belief system, or it's what we're hearing on the news. But I think it's worth us sitting down and facing people who we disagree with, going like, why? Why would you, if you vote for this person, this could hurt my life, and hear their feedback. And there's always a chance that the conversation won't work. And that's okay too. At least you tried, What is that verse where it's like, Jesus sends out his disciples and says, knock on all the doors, and if nobody answers, just dust, or if they push you away, just dust the feet and get the dust off your feet and just continue to move along. But at least you tried. At least you knocked. It's not like you're going to just like sit there and just fist fight, but you could try to have a conversation. You guys, I'm going to close the window. I'm sorry. We can edit this out later, but someone's out there just hitting metal, so I'm going to close the window. Hold on one second. I'll be right back. Anyway, back to the story. Back to the talk here. So we have to make a choice if we're willing to live in attention, but we're not creating attention. It's attention that's already there. And honestly, I think sometimes letting this tension, I just had an experience where I met somebody I'd never met before this past week. And we started to talk about politics, and that came up. And I started talking about peacemaking and not othering people. And, because they were saying stuff like, well, those people are so wrong, and those people. And I said, well, you can't those people it all the time. If we're always going, those people, I mean, they're just as scared of you as you are of them. And so when we come together, when we disagree, well, we are able to see each other's humanity, and we experience each other's humanity. And I'm not talking like on Twitter or on Facebook or things like that. Those are usually dumpster fires. Sometimes you can have good conversations, but rarely. But I'm talking in person. Now I know a lot of you go like, well, Jay, my family. But more than likely, these tough conversations aren't going to be with relatives. Okay, so let's get that. Let's hope that those tough conversations. Now, for me, those tough conversations have happened with my relatives. And it's frustrating and it's tough because you kind of fall into those roles of like, oh, I'm the kid, or I'm the the parent, or I'm the the cousin, or whatever, and you kind of fall into those family roles and those situations. So it can be even tougher. So I'm not asking that. And I'm not asking that, hey, that person who's been beating you or tearing you down your whole life, that's the person you're going to go talk to. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that we can love and discuss things with people who we disagree with, other people in this world, rather than creating an echo chamber and making it us versus them. And, I think this idea of subscribing to binary thinking, goodies and baddies, black and white, is just not it's not really a luxury that people who want to be leaders in social justice movements or in religion or in Christianity really have. We don't have that luxury of going like us and them, those people, black and white thinking. But I see a lot of it. I see a lot of people who are pastors of big denominations saying, I don't want those people in my life. I'm excluding those people. And to me, that's no difference than the people they critique. To me, it's just a mirror image. It's almost like Bizarro Superman. Bizarro Superman, and he lives in Bizarro world where everything is the opposite. So he's bad, but even talks kind of backwards and everything because he's just really just a mirror image. Was it Nietzsche who said, beware of fighting monsters that you don't become a monster yourself. I put up a quote months ago about this guy, and I can't remember who said it. I think it was unknown, but the best way to win with your enemies is not to turn it, to not mirror them, to not do the same things they're doing. Like don't become like your enemies. And I think that's often what we do, is we react rather than act. And so we're going to talk about that in 1 Peter. But I just wanted to make that clear is that, we're not going to, I don't want to create tension, or I don't want to, create a problem, but it's a problem that's already there that needs to be talked about. Okay. Needs to be researched. People need to research these things and look deeper into them, and not just into the news source that I trust. Like, try to find some independent thinking people who really are able to dissect some of these things that people are using to scare us. So if we can put it out there, that, hey, we disagree, but we love you, and we don't like these things, but we're able to have those conversations, that can lead to change. And that's the point, is that we're trying to see change happen. Even if it might just be like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It doesn't happen overnight. John Hume spent his whole adult life working for peace in Northern Ireland. And they finally reached peace, and then he got dementia and started forgetting everything he did, and then passed away. So he literally spent his whole lifetime working to bring a divided group together. We see this in Paul's writings. We see it in Corinthians. He's dealing with people who are divided. He's dealing with a group who are going after each other, and he's trying to we see it in Galatians. Galatians is the best because it's a super divided group, and trying to get people to respect each other's differences and do what I believe John Hume spoke of is finding unity through diversity and being able to realize that, difference is just a chance of birth, So depending on where you were born, how you were raised, it was just a chance of birth. And a way that we can really find unity in diversity, but diversity is tough. We say we're diverse, but usually it's like, well, I love diversity, but only 75% of people are allowed. Like these churches, like all are welcomed, And growing up, I remember, doing LGBTQ work back in 2005, 2006. One of the things that we would talk about, is like, oh, these churches say everyone's welcome, but, if you're LGBTQ and you go to those churches, the second you want to volunteer or be a part of the church, you find that you're really not included. But I will say the same thing about progressive churches. If you want to test your progressive church, walk in wearing a MAGA hat and see if everybody's really welcome there. See what happens. You know what I mean? Like, if you really want to test inclusion to the people who speak most about inclusion. So we all have a group we exclude, and it's more hypocrisy coming from people who've constantly pointed out their whole, these people, we include everyone, but, do you include diversity of thought as well? Do you diversity of politics? Are people who don't agree with you? And people say, well, I can't recognize humans who do recognize my right to exist. So that's, you have that choice, but you also have the choice of saying, do I want to be someone like Dr. King, who makes the world a different place, who challenges the status quo? Or do I just want to be someone who says, that person scares me, that person bothers me, that person doesn't recognize me, so I'm not going to recognize them. Do you want to return the favor? And you can. And I know you can because I see a lot of people, a lot of leaders doing that right now. A lot of people playing the game, playing the political game, and it's really wild to me because I grew up in the 80s when the Christian right just started and the moral majority and all this stuff happened. And everybody's, all these people were swearing allegiance to the conservative Christianity, to Jerry Falwell and that group. And, it's funny that we don't see the irony when we on the left do the very similar thing and go, oh no, this is our king and this is the right, we're doing it the right way. It's like, it looks like a duck and it walks like, it might be a duck, we might just, be ducks of different color or, whatever. And so I think it's important for us to really think about, like, are we practicing hypocrisy? Or are we really trying to work towards inclusion? And does inclusion really mean all people? And I think that's the thing, is if you want to follow a religion like Christianity, that's the thing, is all people are, usually included in that. All people, he saved the whole world, all this, everybody, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So you have to get into that mind of thinking if you're going to do social justice. I mean, I remember spending years and years working with a group called Red Letter Christians. And I think the last time I was there was 2010, sitting with some of the most diverse social justice workers in the world. And I'm not saying this to toot my own horn. I'm saying this so we can actually face the realities of where we're at in this world, because it's important right now. I mean, we're all so angry, we're all so fearful. And it's kind of good to remember where we come from. But the reason that was my last year was I had been a part of that for at least, I think, 5 years of the Red Letter Christians. And sitting there asking these social justice workers that were black and white and Hispanic and Asian and all different backgrounds, saying, can you recognize the civil rights are being denied, that LGBTQ people, this is a social justice issue? And they pushed back and they pushed back and they put. In the last year, it was just me and Peggy Campolo, and it was put on by Tony Campolo, and me and Peggy Campolo were the two affirming voices there, along with, I believe Tony Jones also was there with us. that was saying, hey, this is the way we need to go. And I said, listen, kids are dying. This is 2010. This is not that long ago. And the response to kids were dying was, hey, that's not fair. You can't say that. You can't use that to stoke our emotions. And so this was how reluctant some of the top people who are now most of those, I'd say 89% of the people in that room are now affirming people. And I'm grateful for that. And I just saw the Red Letter Christians put out a post that was affirming, and it's the first thing I've seen of that. And I'm using this example because I think it's vitally important, is that realizing like it takes people time to get to places, and it took these folks almost 20 years for them to get to the point where they became more inclusive of LGBTQ people, where they affirmed them. If I started naming off the names of the people in the room, your jaws would drop. And I'm not going to do that because it would be petty. And maybe I've already been petty enough probably on that. But the point is that it took those folks time to change and grow. It took me 5 years of just sitting there banging my head to the point where I gave up. I probably shouldn't have given up, but I just gave up because it was just so disheartening to see, all these great social justice, civil rights leaders who could not recognize the rights of my LGBTQ brothers and sisters. And so I moved on and continued to cause what I thought was good trouble, but it also hurt my career. But the point is that these conversations, I feel like I was at least part of that change, a part of that movement, a part of that repentance, if you will, that happened. Even though I was just the first part, even though I was the one who kept getting shut down, because I called one of the guys who was a part of that announcement. And he said, oh, Jay, thanks for, you were a part of that, So even when it's so frustrating for us having these conversations and talking to people, we never know when the change is going to happen. And we never know when people are going to come around. Yes, Jason made it clear, it's hard to have a one-sided argument. But what we don't realize is that some people's hearts are so hardened, or they're so, they still believe that, this is wrong, or this is a sin, and it really takes them time, or they're testing to see what other people do first because they're afraid of losing their careers. That's also part of it. That's when that's when you see what's really happening in the church world today. It's like, oh, this is cool now. So this is, people will go with what's popular and what's not popular often. And that's just human nature, and two, when this is your job and you're trying to, take care of your kids and pay bills, I understand the call to want to be kind of a play to the crowd. Unfortunately, I have like a death wish, or want to make my career crap for the rest of my life unconsciously, so I continue to push envelopes. But, there's no more one-sided conversations, because now is the time, and we have to realize that even when we're having these one-sided conversations, that we are chipping away at a hard exterior, that there's a recognition of humanity. And I think what happened with those groups is I was a straight white guy there fighting for LGBTQ rights. What I think is more LGBTQ people got involved. And as soon as they were able to say, oh, these are our brothers and sisters, oh, these are human beings just as well, they were able to come around. It wasn't just me going like, hey, I don't really have a dog in this fight, but you guys should think this way. And they're going like, okay, dude. Okay, and sometimes I forget, like, they all probably see me as like the son of, a lot of those leaders are like, we know your parents, so they just see like, oh, this poor kid coming in here telling us to love gays is trying to work out his own trauma. And then maybe they were right to some point. But the conversation is, the time is right to do what is right, and the time is now. And my hope is that this conversation is going to help us find unity through diversity, that this conversation will not just lead to, I'm not talking a utopian society, but this will lead to a place where we can also learn to compromise and agree to disagree. It's also to the point where I would hope it would lead us to not feeling that we need to turn our convictions, into laws, and not to take away someone else's freedom. And that we would recognize that that's a very important part. That, I always thought growing up that America was like supposed to be like like a tapestry, and all these different things, and that you're not always going to agree. You're going to have different religions. You're going to have different people. You're going to have different ideas, different faiths, different whatever, and that we were. And so I hope this type of thing that leads to us going. It's like, hey, we're not going to legislate our religious convictions. What we're going to do though is make sure everybody can get a good job that pays well, and that rent is affordable, and that when we get sick, we're able to go to the doctor without going bankrupt. And it doesn't matter if you're gay or Muslim or Jewish or black or Hispanic or Asian, or Indian or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like everybody is able to get the rights to live, because you can't, like John Hume used to say, you can't eat a flag. And what he meant was like politics isn't going to feed us. And we can't have real diversity, and we can't have real unity unless everybody's at the table. So he was a Catholic, but he also saw the need to have Protestants at the table, to the point where he wanted Protestants at the table that the IRA, a Catholic group, firebombed John Hume's house, even though he was a Catholic, because they're like, hey, you're being too inclusive. So what happens is when you become too inclusive and you want to include everybody, and you really do love your enemies, but then you love other people's enemies, you often become the enemy, and you often get the pushback, and you often get the criticism, and that's really tough. But that's why we need more people doing this work, is because the more we do it, the easier it gets. That's like when I was first came out as an LGBTQ affirming pastor, I would go and meet with other pastors that I knew were privately affirming and who had much bigger platforms than me, and go like, listen, I'm getting a lot of like fire here, even friendly fire. And like, if you could just come out and say that you're affirming as well and share some of this burden with me, that would really help, because I feel like I got a lot of anger and weirdness pointed straight at me. Because I went right on to Larry King and said it. Like, I preached it, then got invited on Larry King, and I said it. And my church went from like 100 people to 7 people, and and we had 7 staff at the time, and then we had to let the whole staff go. So that all happened. But what I'm saying was, I was reaching out to other people like, can you do this more? Can you do this more? But the point is now it's not like the biggest argument in the world. We're still having this conversation, but we're having this conversation usually with people who see things, in a very black and white sense. People who don't have a lot of room for nuance. And unfortunately, often I see the left doing the same things, but they don't want that nuance. Like, we want you to accept our nuances, but not your nuances. And I think we're making the mistake again to that. So this is not good. Peggy Campolo said, if you want to be a bridge, you're going to get walked on by both sides. And that is very true. That's what happens. So it's not for the faint of heart. I also want to make it clear, as one of the things I've learned in the 12-step program, was always the saying, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, it's progress, not perfection. Okay, so no one's going to be perfect at this. We're all going to have bad days. We're all going to have moments where we have to push the block button, or we have to just say, hey, I got to take some time to myself. I need some time away. This is too tough to do. I need to be in a community where I'm supported for this type of thing. I need to go talk to somebody. Lawrence Richardson, who is a friend of mine who's a pastor in the UCC, I often call him and go, hey, I got in this really bad argument, and I think some anger came out, and I don't think that was the most productive way. Can we talk about this, and can you help me with this, and can we look at this? And that's why me and Lawrence did that video about disagreeing, like, how to disagree with progressive Christians. We did that because we had that conversation. He's like, we should do a video about this. Or I'll call my friend Tony Jones or Pete Ross and go, hey guys, am I just a salty bastard, or am I doing this? How can I do this better? And it's not easy. As you can tell, I'm exhausted. Like, I am exhausted. Like, I'm trying to raise money so we can keep this thing going. I'm trying to find part-time work. I've got a little part-time work working on like doing lawns and things like that right now. I'm like, but still trying to do that, and it's stressful. And it's stressful when you have the people you love. Because lately I've had people I really love kind of be like, what you're saying is really hard, and it's really challenging me. And they're just trying to be really nice in the same way of saying like, I'm not, it's not really making me stoked or happy to hear what you're preaching, And I mean, people I really love and care about and people I've gone to bat for calling me, telling me like, this makes me a bit uncomfortable, and it's like, but I feel like this is what I have to do. And I honestly believe like, not like this is what Jesus would do, but I believe that this is what Dr. King and people like John Hume called us to do. I think it's what the Apostle Paul called us to do. I do believe it's what Jesus called us to do, but I also believe it's what my mom did. My mom was always trying to get us, and Tillich said it in this way, is that when you see our other's humanity, we realize that we're all part of the ground of being. We're all part of God, which is the ground of being. If I get any further in trying to explain God, then God ceases to be. I can't do it justice. I mean, I can give you symbolism, but even the symbolism makes God smaller. But we're all part of the agreement. Now, my mom used to say, is we're all made of the same old dirt. We're all part of the same thing. And that's how she was inclusive that way. And I shared that on one of my private accounts. And I had more of my progressive friends coming being like, why they were hurt, why they were worried about their LGBTQ kids or their friends and people like that. Pushback than I did even my like conservative family members who I really have that little Facebook page open for, is so they can see my kids, at least one way. And none of them really responded in a bad way, but like my more liberal friends were like, and I was like, oh, and I had to contact them and be like, this is, I'm trying to say something to some of my relatives and family and, evangelical folks I grew up with, but it's really funny, like, the ones who react, you never know what you're going to get. I often wish we could be more like philosophers. One of the things I love about watching philosophical debates and philosophers debate each other is they do get heated. I mean, if you ever watch Zizek debate anybody, I mean, he's like rubbing his t-shirt. He's like, oh, and he's like, this man is a fool, But afterwards, most of the time, these guys go and have a dinner together, have a beer together, or have, a bowl of soup together. And they're able to disagree and really disagree and harshly disagree. And then say like, oh, and I also wrote my whole book about why I disagree with you. And they still share meals together. I think when we take like eternal damnation out of the conversation, that really helps a lot, folks. That kind of scare tactic. But these people are able to do that. And in the 12-step program, there's always grace for you. There's always this grace. Even if you go out and do the one thing you're not supposed to, you come back, you get a white chip, and you continue on. No one gets kicked out. It's people, you're able to argue and make mistakes without being cast out and without others casting you out. And so I think we could learn from the 12-step program, and I think we could also learn from these philosophers and educators who are able to disagree and even disagree with each other within their own books and still be civil and kind and really actually, I think, love each other and like each other genuinely. And Jesus even isn't asking us to like each other. Jesus is just saying love each other. Just love each other because you're all made of the same old dirt or you're all part of the ground of being. And so there's a reason not to scapegoat people. And it's funny because my girlfriend I visited recently, she said, she was talking when I was in this group and we were all talking, and she's like, yeah, you kind of are like the main, she's like, well, scapegoating because what your family went through, and I harp on that a lot, and I don't want to push that all the time, like, poor me. I'm not saying poor me, pour me another Diet Coke. I'm using these just as examples of like, I know what it's like to have both sides think you're bad and crazy and bizarre, and that doesn't feel good either. I also know what it's like that, my father barely talks to me because of my theology and politics. So I've been cut out. I've been cut out from someone I love, and I can tell you what, it hurts like hell. It really, really hurts like hell. It's lonely. Especially when you have kids and your kids can't talk to your family and your kids can't have other family members to have in their life that are part of your life. When you're afraid you can't pay your bills, you can't pick up the phone and go, hey, Dad, could you help me? Hey, we can't even have conversations. So I don't like when we do this. Like, so when I see my progressive liberal brothers and sisters who I've been most of my life doing this to people, it puts up all sorts of red flags and warning signs, and I go, oh my God, I know what it's like to be on the other side of that, and it sucks. It's awful. It's awful to think that like your relationship with your own blood is less important. You know, that politics are above that, like even, or religion is above that. Like, oh, when people, that's what I hated when kids are getting, LGBTQ kids were getting kicked out of their houses because it was saying our religion is more important than you. You know, that's why I get so hurt when my dad's like, oh, I just don't want you to go to hell. Because it's like, how could you follow a God that would send me to hell? Like, how do you do that? You know, like, and you're okay with that, and you cut me out, and you just live that way. It's horribly painful and alienating. And it affects my other relationships with people I have, because I'm in pain, because I'm depressed, because I suffer from clinical depression. And so all these things play into each other. And so what I'm saying is we've got to be aware that when we, I don't think there's any problem with having, boundaries. But what I always say is put a little door in that boundary. Have some windows in your boundary. Open up those windows, and be ready to open up that door every now and then, because I don't think, I think a lot of us who are like recovering people pleasers, myself included, believe it or not, there are times that we have to have boundaries, but we also need to have doors that are always open for reconciliation. If we're unable to love our enemies, we're unable to forgive. If we're unable to forgive, it's like we're missing the essence of following Christianity, of being followers of Christ, So arguing without casting the other out. Knowing when it's time to put these type of things aside. And I would say if you're someone who's built a wall with somebody because of politics or religion or something like that, of someone who's close to you in the family, you should make it clear, like, hey, I have a really hard time talking to you because I don't like this, but I'm always here if you need me for something else, because I will always love you. I mean, that type of thing is very important. But the media and social media just get us all in a frenzy and get us so fearful. It's like, that's why I'm just like, I hear people argue about different things, and I'm like, yeah, but I mean, I heard this my whole life in the Christian world is, oh, they're going to take away our Bibles. Oh, they're going to take away our rights. Oh, they're going to imprison us. Oh, they're going to do all that. I've heard this, and there might be more evidence because people, whatever. But the point is, I've seen this just happen every cycle. Just different sides reacting. This is the one where I've seen most fear on both sides, and more division than I've ever seen, especially amongst pastors and leaders. So let's look at 1 Peter 3:15 and see what it says here. But in your hearts, sanctify Christ as Lord. Always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an account for the hope that is in you. Now, this is talking about their faith, but let's continue on. 16. Yet, do it with gentleness and reverence. I'm going to underline that right now. Do that with gentleness and reverence. Keep your conscience clear so that when you are maligned, those who abuse you for your good conduct in Christ may be put to shame. And that's kind of the idea behind nonviolence, is when people say, well, hey, Dr. King, when they're beating us, what kind of defense moves can I have? And Dr. King said, you look them in the eye. You think he would be like, wax on, wax off. No, he said, you look them in the eye and you force them to recognize your humanity. And here it says, the conduct in Christ might not be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if suffering should be God's will, than to suffer for doing evil. Did you hear that? It's better to suffer for doing good than suffering for doing evil. And in some ways, when we refuse to talk to the others, when we give up on the others, in some ways it's kind of violence, because we're just saying, well, we'll just allow them to continue to be victims of misinformation. We kind of allow it to happen. So I'm not saying this is something that's going to happen overnight. I'm not saying that you can't have boundaries, because that's the kind of pushback I get. Everybody goes to very extremes. This is not a utopian society idea. This is going to be compromise involved. There's going to be agreeing to disagree, and all those things that we're told are bad. but honestly would make the world much safer and better for people in poverty, people with mental health, would help stop wars and things like that. So we also have to think of others. Often we only think of ourselves or our own tribe. And so that's also the fear of echo chambers, is that we think, well, this group did good for me, even though they're hurting other people, they did good for me, even though they're supporting, a genocide, they still did good for me, so I'm going to support, you have to step outside of your bubble, and take a very sobering look of how things are and what's wrong with the system, and that there's a bigger thing at play here, and there's a bigger change that needs to be done. When we fear something, we allow that to control us. And I think that's what we're happening, is we're allowing our fears to control us. And when you're living within that type of fear, you don't get your best self. You don't get your most loving or caring or patient or kind or joyful self or peaceful self as the fruits of the Spirit. And you'll notice if you live in fear, those fruits start to slowly disappear. And it becomes harder to love those who you disagree with, to the point where you see liberals saying, like, I won't even accept other liberals if they don't vote for the one person I think they should vote for, and I don't even want to talk to you or hear from you. That's the type of exclusion that's happening. Like, now it's not even that if you're a part of the party or the tribe. Now it's becoming just a smaller group of who's in and who's out. And it's complete exclusion. It's exclusionary. So if you believe in inclusion, believe in inclusion. If you're going to say you're inclusive, really ask yourself, am I inclusive? Am I willing to take on the burden of truly being inclusive of also people who think differently than I do? Are you willing to have, as Lawrence said, a purple church, a church that has blue and red in it? One of the other things I would say is, when I was talking about the Red Letter Christian event and the things I was going to and how hard that was to see, but I wrote this down last night. Stop boasting about what ourselves learned in time. We boast about, like, well, I've got this figured out and I know this and I've been affirming longer on the street than most people, I know what's going on, But we should be teaching the ignorant, not judging them. We should be teaching those who don't understand this stuff why we think this way and feel this way, and not sitting there and saying, you're all idiots. So if you have a whole thing where you're just making fun of evangelicals, you're not probably going to get an idea to sit down, because they all think, well, you think we're fools and idiots and dumb. So we're probably not going to have a conversation, So we should be teaching those, not judging them. If we feel that we have something to offer, if we believe something, if we've been set free, is it fine for us just to take that key that we got that set us free and just put it in our pocket and just hold on to it while everybody else is in chains? It takes some people a lot longer to get to where they're at. And the reason you might be where you're at is because there's something calling you to be a fighter for justice. To be a social justice person, to be a creator of peace, to be a peacemaker. What did Jesus say about peacemakers? Blessed are the peacemakers. So you getting there early might be a way for you saying, like, oh, I need to help teach people. I need to help people grow. Jesus didn't say worship me. Jesus said follow me. So we have this idea of what is it to be Christ-like is to help people follow. But if you have the key and you're going, oh, I'm not going to help them because I am the guardian of grace, or I am the guardian of liberalism, or I am the guardian of conservatism, I am the guardian of, politics, and and these people are just all fools, And the wild thing is a lot of these people I see used to be conservatives. And they don't want to go back. I've never voted for a conservative in my life. I don't know if that's something to be proud of or not, but that's just how it is. That's how I was, I was a lifelong Democrat. But if I have the key, this is great. Someone just put up Matthew 7:5, First, take the log out of your own eye before you can get the speck out of your friend's eye. And maybe we had, but it looks like we could just continue to, we just get different types of logs, and we look at all these little specks and go like, oh, and we're sitting there with these giant logs coming out of our eyes. There was a band called Plank Eye, and it used to have like a 2x4 shooting out of the guy's eye was their, I think was their logo. And it's like that, you know, we're like this, you know, oh, we have the key, but we're not going to use it because it's too hard, because it makes us feel bad. And I think that's one of the things that worries me about, like, you know, self-care and self-things and self-tech. We've got to do this. I don't think there's anything wrong with self-care. I go to therapy. I've gone to therapy my whole life. I couldn't do this without having positive therapy in my life and having great people who I can talk to. I think that's vital. But I think it gets to the point where we're like, well, I can't be offended, or I can't get hurt, or I can't get mad. And we allow our pain to dictate who we are. And when we do that, we become stagnant. You become stagnant. And you just get into your little circle, and you live in your little bubble, and you go, this is our club, and you're not included. And we become bullies. We become grace bullies. Well, I've got it figured out. I'm an inclusive bully, you know? So I'm going to make fun of people who aren't inclusive and haven't arrived and haven't had the same education that I have. Oh, what fools. They're not smart like me. They're not, you know, enlightened like I am. You're just a bully. You're just an enlightened bully. You're just like, I'm an 80% inclusive and they're 10% inclusive. You know what I mean? Which one's better? You're both excluding people. You're both saying, oh, everyone's included. You're both being hypocrites. We're both being hypocrites. So that's the talk. The talk is back in Peter 3, 1 Peter 3. I'm going to read it again. Always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an account for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and reverence. Keep your conscience clear. How many times have you been on online arguments and then can't sleep at night because you've said such horrible things? And they said things too. Then you come back with better comebacks, or I do it in the shower. I'm like, that's my arguing machine. So that's it. That's it. Doing tension well. Living in the tension, because the tension's already there. And it's like a boil. You have to peel off the Band-Aid, cut it open, let all the goo out, and it's gross, and it has to heal, and it needs air, and it needs sun, and it's not pretty, but eventually it heals. But if we just cover it up and ignore it, it's just going to get worse and fester more and more. And that's a really gross way of explaining it, but that's where we're at right now. So, my kids have been with their mom for 2 weeks on a vacation, seeing their grandparents in Switzerland, and they're coming back today. So I'm going to get in the arguing machine after this talk, so I smell nice for them, and give them great big hugs and celebrate their return. So I'm very excited that my babies are back today, and all the fun things we're going to do this summer. So listen, I'm going to leave you with that, but I'm also going to leave you with Revolution, this work. Like me re-recording these talks, me reading these books, and last night I've been reading a bunch of Paul Tillich, and I'm trying to continue to learn and bring the best of this type of work of peacemaking to you. Revolution has always been a ministry of grace. Grace is anarchy, which means it's for everybody, and it doesn't go by any of our rules. And we're going to continue to do this work, but we really need your help. We really need your support. And we'd rather have you than your support, to be honest with you. But to be here, we do need your financial support. Right now, I think I have to raise $900 in 5 days. I've gotten to the point where I've taken over almost all of the stuff that our accountant does now, except for like the stuff that I'm worried that would get us in trouble. So they handle all the tax stuff, so we have every T crossed and I dotted. But I'm like transferring funds, doing all the things, trying to get everything together so we can save money on that as well. But we need raise about $900 in the next 5 days. And I get an email from my accountant. Sometimes I feel like I work for them, because I also have to pay them, and I pay them hourly. So that's why I'm taking over some of those works. We need your support. If you like these talks, if you'd like to see more of these talks, I'm starting to do kind of caveats on Instagram, and then I also post them on Facebook as well during the week, where, just kind of a 5-minute thought on how we can do this better, how we can grow as a community. And I have to say this will probably be the focus for the next 6 months, is this disagreeing well, this arguing well, so we become better. And then maybe after the election, we'll start talking about healing and licking our wounds and caring for others and not being sore losers or sore winners. But right now, what I'm trying to do is lessen the tension a little bit. And what we're trying to do as a revolution, that's all of you watching right now or listening on listening on your headphones, walking around when the podcast comes out or watching this later, is what we're really trying to get everybody to do is practice this, is that we're going to be the people who are trying to lessen a little bit of the tension in this world. But we might have to carry that tension. Yesterday, someone sent me a message saying, I've given up hope on all of this stuff. I don't know what to do. And I'm a pessimist. I am a pessimist. I am waiting for the sky to fall and the other shoe to drop always. But I'm also a prisoner of hope. Okay? And so what I said to this person was, rather than try to get them to go out and do hard work because they seemed exhausted, I said, I will carry a little bit of hope for you right now. Because we're supposed to share each other one's burdens. And right now, even hope feels like a burden. So maybe we got to share each other's burden. Maybe we have to carry a little hope on our back for each other. Like Johnny Cash talked in the back of that song, I'm the Man in Black. You should go listen to that song. It's pretty cool. So you can go to revolutionchurch.com to support our work. And I will see you next week. Please check into our Instagram, the Revolution. It's Revolution Church 94, I believe, or Revolution 94. And then also I'm Jay Baker on there as well. Or check us out on Facebook, and because there'll be little updates and different things through the week. Thank you for making this work possible. Thank you for supporting me. I'll tell you what, when I have a little room to breathe, it really does make this work a lot easier when I know we're going to be able to pay our bills. And I'm going to continue to do what I can to do that, even outside of this. But I just want to say thank you all who've done that and have continued to support us and shared this and liked these talks. Liking these talks helps a lot. Subscribing helps us a lot as well. So you say, I don't have any money, but I can give you a thumbs up. I can subscribe, and I can share this on social media with other people. That really helps us as well. So there's other ways you can help Revolution by liking these talks and sharing them with your friends. Even if you want to share them with your friends and say, look at this crazy idiot, that makes me so mad, then it still helps. So thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.